Welcome to Latin for Beginners. This course uses a traditional method of classical Latin instruction which emphasizes reading skills. This makes it possible to start with a classic public domain textbook, Latin for Beginners by Benjamin L. Duge, and boost its effectiveness with an online tool that greatly increases the number of exercises accompanying each lesson. The text may be found at gutenberg.org. A link is in the video description. The online tool, as well as additional resources and materials for the course, may be found at selfstudyclassics.com. This video covers Lesson 5 of the text. If you haven't read over that portion of the text, please stop and do so now. That way you'll get the most out of the time you spend watching. Also, there is a progression to the course. If this video is your first encounter with Latin for Beginners, it's a good idea to make sure you're comfortable with the material in Lessons 1 through 4 before proceeding. In Lesson 4, we learned how to use the accusative and genitive. In Lesson 5, we are learning a new case, the dative, and how it is used. As in previous videos, we will work some example exercises in order to nail down the concepts in the lesson. Our first exercise is to translate pecunia nautis victoriam dat. First, we'll try to identify the forms and parts of speech of the words in the sentence. Pecunia is a noun. Its ending is nominative singular. Nautis is also a noun. Its ending suggests that it is a dative plural. Victoriam is yet another noun and has the am ending, so we know it is accusative singular. Dat is a verb, and it is transitive. It has the t ending, so it is singular. Let's see what we can learn from the relationships between the words in this sentence. Pecunia is in the nominative, and it agrees with the verb dat in number. Let's label it as the subject. Nautis is dative, which suggests that it is the indirect object of dat. We'll use a white line for an indirect object relationship. Victoriam is the accusative form, and the verb is transitive, so it looks like this is the direct object. Now that we know the roles of the words in the sentence, we can assign them meanings. Pecunia is the money. Nautis, as plural indirect object, is to the sailors. Victoriam is victory, and dat is gives. Thus, we have the money to the sailors the victory gives. Or, to put it in a word order more natural to English, the money gives the victory to the sailors. Now for our next example. Fabulae dominae pugnam nuntiant. Let's identify the forms. Fabulae is a noun. It has that I ending that now has three possible interpretations. In the previous lesson, we learned that it could be nominative plural or genitive singular. In this lesson, we learned that it could also be dative singular. We will leave the case and number blank until we can gather some more information from the context. Dominae is a noun, but it has the same ending. So again, we'll have to wait a bit before we determine the case and number. Pugnam is a noun with an ending that is unambiguously accusative, singular. Nuntiant is a verb, and it is transitive. The nt ending is the plural form. Now for the relations between words. When translating Latin, there are often several ways to parse the same sentence. The same is true of English, of course. There is inherent ambiguity in natural language syntax that can only be resolved through context. Let's look at some ways we might parse this sentence. Fabulae might be nominative plural, and the subject of the sentence agreeing with nuntiant, which has the plural form. Dominae might then be a genitive singular and have a possessive role with fabulae. Pugnam is unambiguous and must be the direct object of nuntiant. If we parse the sentence in this way, fabulae has the meaning stories, dominae is the ladies, pugnam is battle, and nuntiant is announce. Putting them all together, we have the ladies' stories announce the battle. Let's look at another way we could parse this sentence. Fabulae might be genitive singular and possessive with domini. Some might object that the idea of a story possessing something seems silly, but the category of relationships that may be expressed by the genitive of the possessor covers relationships analogous to possession, as well as physical possession itself. It may be that kind of relationship that is expressed here. Domini, then, would be nominative plural, and agreeing with nuntiant as the subject of the sentence. Pugnam is still the direct object. If we parse the sentence in this way, fabulae has the meaning the stories, domini is ladies, pugnam is battle, and nuntiant is announce. Putting them all together, we have the stories ladies announce the battle. A somewhat less likely interpretation than the previous one, but still very possible in some contexts. Let's look at another parsing. In this version, fabulae is again genitive, singular, and possessive with domini. But domini this time is dative singular, making it the indirect object of nuntiant, which we will signify with a white arrow. Pugnam is the direct object. That leaves us with no explicit subject of the sentence, so the subject must be implied. Since the form of the verb is plural, the implicit subject would be the third person plural pronoun they. Parsed in this way, fabulae has the meaning of the story, domini is to the lady, pugnam is battle, and nuntiant is they announce. Rearranging the phrases into English word order gives us they announce the battle to the lady of the story. A very different, but nonetheless possible, reading. Let's look at one more. We'll read fabulae as nominative plural this time, so it would be the subject and agree with nuntiant. Domini is again the dative singular, and therefore the indirect object. Pugnam, as usual, is the direct object. As far as meanings go, this gives us the stories for fabulae, to the lady for domini, the battle for pugnam, and announce for nuntiant. After putting it all together, we have the stories announce the battle to the lady. As we work examples in this course, we won't always look at every possible interpretation in this way. That would be far too time-consuming. The purpose of this exercise was just to demonstrate how many readings a simple sentence such as this might have. As you follow along with the examples in these videos, it is easy to get the idea that the translation process is deterministic and that it always leads inevitably to the result shown. This exercise is a reminder that there are often alternative readings and that there is always a subjective dimension to translation. Domina is a noun, and its form is nominative singular. Puellas is also a noun, and its form is accusative plural. Amat is a verb. It is transitive. The T ending means it is singular. Quia is a new conjunction that we have learned in this lesson. Filiae is a noun, and there are several possible case and number combinations for its form. By now, we should feel comfortable with choosing one based on intuition, and modifying that choice later if necessary. Looking ahead and seeing a verb that will often accommodate an indirect object, we're going to choose dative singular. Coronam is a noun with the am ending of the accusative singular. Dant is a verb, which is transitive, and has the nt ending to indicate its plural. Now to figure out how all these forms fit together. Domina is in the nominative and agrees in number with amat, so we'll make that the subject of this part of the sentence. Since puellas is the accusative plural and the verb is transitive, it is likely to be the direct object. Quia is a conjunction that combines two sentences into a compound sentence, so we'll note that with arrows that connect it to the verbs of each portion of the compound. Filiae, as a dative, would be the indirect object of a verb such as dant, which is the kind of verb that can accommodate an indirect object. Coronam, as an accusative next to a transitive verb, is likely to be a direct object. Having analyzed the structure, let's assign meanings to the words. Domina is the lady. Puellas is girls, and amat is loves. Quia is because. Filiae would be her daughter. we can leave off the to here, as English often will with certain verbs, such as give, that can have indirect objects. And we supply the her, even though it is not present, as Latin will often leave possessive pronouns such as his, your, our, or my unspoken when they are obvious from the context. Coronam we render as a wreath. There is no explicit subject in this part of the compound, and the verb is in the plural form, so we infer the third person plural pronoun, they, and translate dant as they are giving. After putting all of this together into English word order, we have the lady loves the girls because they are giving her daughter a wreath. All right, let's do one more. This one will be English to Latin, and it is a question. Whom does the farmer tell the story? With English to Latin, we reverse the translation process and determine the relationships between words first so that we can figure out the appropriate forms. Whom is the indirect object of tell. Does is part of the main verb. English will split the verb form with the subject when the sentence is a question. We call does a helper. But the important thing to remember is that the verb form we are trying to render into Latin is does tell. The subject here is the farmer, and the direct object of tell is the story. Now to figure out the forms. Whom is a word that stands in for an unknown noun in a question, so it is an interrogative pronoun, and it will be some form of quis. It is an indirect object, so the form will be dative singular, and that form, as we have learned in this lesson, is qui. The farmer is a noun, and is rendered with agricola in Latin. As the subject, it should be nominative, and it is singular, so we can leave it as is. Does tell is a verb, and the Latin for it is narrat. The subject is singular, so we can leave the form as narrat. The story is a noun, and the Latin for it is fabula. Since it is the direct object, we need the accusative case, and it is singular, so the form is fabulam. Putting all the Latin together, we get qui agricola narrat fabulam, or to move the verb to the end for a more natural Latin word order, qui agricola fabulam narrat. That concludes our set of examples for the lesson on the dative case. The best way to achieve mastery of these concepts is to work a lot of exercises, and you can find plenty over at selfstudyclassics.com. Head to the practice section and choose Lesson 5. Once you feel confident about the Lesson 5 material, keep an eye out for the video on Lesson 6 of Latin for Beginners. Thanks for watching.